Howdy folks, Jeff Reins here. I thought I'd try to figure out how these dang course eval forms work once and for all. Most folks I know in the English department are word people, not number people, and I'm certainly one of them. But after a little bit of research, I think I figured out how to read these things. Before I start, I'd like to go over what I perceive to be the goal of these documents. When I got back my first set of course evals, I had the same pit in my stomach sensation I feel right before getting final grades. But now I don't have to feel that way because being able to read the evals allows me to see that they are useful tools. These official looking charts aren't my grade as a teacher. They are an opportunity to get feedback from the students so that I can think about my teaching in new ways. Yes, some people in the department and the administration can probably see my individual scores, but unless something is horribly awry, you will probably never hear back from them about these documents. And frankly, if my numbers were majorly screwed up in some way, I would want someone to tell me there's a problem. But in nearly every case, these forms aren't about the people in charge around here conducting some sort of inquisition. They're about you getting a better idea of what is going on in your own teaching space. Okay, let's start with what we've got here. You should have received two different kinds of forms. The first kind I'll call the course sheet. You should have one course sheet for each section you taught. In my case, I have three. I TA'd 2 sections of Brit Lit and taught a business writing course. You should also have one overall report that totals all your scores and provides department-wide statistics as well. We'll start with the course sheets. You may want to have your own evals in hand as I go through this stuff. Also, it will help a lot if you watch the rest of the video in full screen mode if you aren't already doing so. Okay, this thing looks complicated, but we can break it down into manageable chunks. We'll start with the instructor number, which is your number that identifies you in the department, the department number, which is 424 for English, the semester being reported, and the specific course. So far, so good. This section merely restates the questions asked of the students, while these sections show what the high and low values for each question are meant to indicate. I hope you are with me so far. Now let's get to the muddier parts. The column labeled N simply indicates how many people responded to each question. So in this case, 20 students answered every question. How they answered is revealed in this section. We'll zoom in on one question to see how that works. When asked to rate the course in general, 5 out of 20 students said the course was excellent, woohoo, while 10 said it was good, if I remember the wording on the form. 2 answered that the course was average or in the middle or whatever, while 1 person thought it was poor and 2 people thought it was very poor. Dang. Underneath the number of respondents for each category is the percentage of the class that answered that way. So 25% of the class thought the course was excellent and only 10% thought it sucked eggs. Incidentally, one thing you can do with this data is to mentally combine the 2 categories to the right and left of the middle answer. This might help you understand the situation in even simpler terms. In this case, 75% of the students responding thought the course was better than average, while only 10% thought it was worse than average. Not too shabby. Another thing you can do is put the data into a spreadsheet like this, which makes it easy to make a graph like this or like this that might help you visualize the data. Note that while most of the questions are built on a low is good design, questions 2, 3, and 4 aren't really structured in that way. This is where our ability to interpret the charts can come in handy in posing new questions. So for example, I can't really tell from this data if the 2 people that hated this class are the same 2 people who had a strong background in the material, or if they are among the 6 people who had a weak background, or maybe the haters are somewhere in between. But now I can ask myself a question like, who was more likely to hate the course, the newbies who felt totally overwhelmed by the material, or the Brit Lit nerds who felt held back because I was constantly nursing the newbies along? More importantly, I can ask myself which way I might prefer to lean when I teach the same material in the fall. That's how I read this data, as a tool for planning future courses by generating new ways of interrogating my own teaching. Note that if I needed to know whether those two course-hating students generally rated me low or not in all the questions, I could go to the department office and ask Amy or one of the other nice staffers for access to the individual bubble sheets. Of course, you probably don't want to bend your teaching around one or two statistical outliers either. Only 2 people thought the course was very poor, and only 1 person gave my teaching the lowest possible score. It's probably not worth my time worrying about that handful of students, as it is just inevitable that in any class of 20 there's someone who's not going to click with the instructor. Also, in practical terms, think about student attendance before you take 1 or 2 low scores too personally. For all I know, those 2 low scores could be from a couple of students who missed more classes than they attended. They wouldn't even really be in a position to accurately rate the course or my teaching. Flipping to my business writing course form, we can see that questions 1 and 2 aren't the only places you can look for interesting stuff. The results here for questions 1 and 2 look pretty good to me, but the relative flatness of the answers on questions 8 and 9 might be food for thought. The overall results are still largely positive, but now I'm asking myself, how could I move those numbers closer to the agree end of the spectrum? What can I do better to relate the content to the course goals? Or was the problem that the content was fine, but I didn't do a good job articulating those goals? Was the preparation score a little off because I taught this course at the end of a very busy day? Or was it because I was teaching this material for the first time? I don't have answers for any of these questions right at this moment, but at least I have something to think about. So let's look at my last course sheet for my other Britlit section. These last 3 columns might help you get an overall sense of the data. Or maybe they're a step too far for you and you should ignore them. Remember, these forms are a tool for you to use. If this next stuff gives you the heebie-jeebies, just concentrate on the sections I've already outlined. But I'm going to try to make some sense of them, especially because I think I need to understand them to see how I measure up against the department overall. Okay, the mean column is the arithmetic mean of the scores received, also known simply as the average. The med column is the median score. These are confusingly similar concepts, but as you can see from the scores in the columns, they are not identical. The median indicates the midpoint of the data in a different way than the mean. Based upon a wee bit of research, for the small data sets we are examining on this sheet, the median is probably the better number to use when thinking about the typical response for each question, at least for certain definitions of the word typical. So on this sheet, the typical member of this class indicated that my teaching was good, or a 2, because almost as many students ranked me as superior as they did average. Going back to the columns, SD stands for standard deviation, a term from the field of statistics that I am not sure I completely grasp, but the point seems to be to help you understand the mean column in a more nuanced way. A low SD indicates that the scores are clustered tightly around the average, while a high SD shows a bigger spread of results. For our purposes here, what that means is that the lower the SD, the more likely the mean column reflects the opinion of more of the class. So in this case, I could feel pretty confident that the 1 point something means here are a good indication of the overall class opinion for questions 10 and 11, because the SDs accompanying them are low. The much higher SD on question 2 suggests that the mean isn't really providing much useful information because the answers are spread out over the entire continuum of scores. So just to recap, the median is probably the best column of the 3 to use when looking for an at-a-glance score for each question answered by the students. but since the mean is literally the average result, you might find that easier to wrap your head around. However, if the SD score is high, like 1.0 or more, the mean may not be telling you as much as you'd like to know. Okay, let's look at the overall report. You probably have just one of these unless you're also teaching some course at higher than the 100 level. See the little level 100 thingy there? Anyway, understanding the mean, SD, and median stuff is required to make this report sing. What you are looking at here is the way all my student responses responded for all 3 courses, measured up against the overall department scores for over 1,700 responses in God knows how many sections. Probably a good place to start here is to compare the 2 median columns. As you can see, for 9 out of 12 questions, my results are right in alignment with the rest of the department. Considering how seriously we take pedagogy around here, I'm pretty pleased with that. For questions 2 and 4, I've got a lower median than the overall department results, and for question 3, I've got a higher median. So now I can look back at one of the course sheets to see which questions those were and ask myself why my numbers are different and what, if anything, I should do about it in the future. You can also use the means, but it's a little more messy. Remember that I suggested that the SD column indicates how much you can really trust the mean. Any mean with an SD of more than 1.0 in either section is probably not worth getting worked up over. So in this case, I don't think the mean tells me that much about questions 1 to 5 or 12, though maybe somebody with a stronger knowledge of statistics would have a different opinion. My means for questions 6 through 10 have low SDs, but the department numbers have SDs hovering near 1. I think that means that my individual means for those questions are more reliable as useful data than the overall numbers. Maybe there's useful data there and maybe there isn't. Really, the means for question 11 is the only place where I feel confident about both sides of the data. My mean comes with a super low SD of 0.39, while the department's mean has a respectable SD of 0.74. Checking back to one of the course forms, I see that the question is, my grade will be determined by papers, test reports, or other appropriate criteria. Agree or disagree. My mean score is 0.17 below the department average. Since this is a low is good type question, I can smugly conclude that I did a better than average job in this category. What I'm not so smug about is why the students rated me better than average. Can I replicate those results? Only if I think carefully about how I got there. So now that you know more about reading these results, maybe you wish you hadn't watched this video. If you don't like some of your scores, don't panic. Instead, be proactive. There are lots of people at ISU who want you to succeed and lots of great resources available to instructors. Find a colleague or mentor you can talk to. If you're teaching composition, get in touch with someone on the writing program leadership team and ask for help. Or contact CTLT, the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology. They have lots of great programs for instructors. And please don't be shy about sharing the scores that concern you. More communication of this sort between peers helps individual teachers, the department, and our students. And before you rush off and revamp your syllabus to incorporate what you've learned and thought about, don't forget to stop by the department office and check the backs of the bubble sheets for written comments. In my limited experience, not a lot of undergrads offer written comments, but it's worth looking into. Also, for your next class, you might want to consider writing your own course evals in addition to the required ones. With the help of one of the brilliant staffers at CTLT, I developed this eval for the course I TA'd in the spring, because I wanted to know what was worth keeping and what was needing revision before I flew solo this fall. Whatever the needs of the department and the admin, the standard evals didn't ask all the questions that I wanted answers to. So that's probably more than you could possibly want to know about your course evals. I hope this video was helpful.